Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The rain was pounding hard, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windshield as Rick Lawson stared at the house. From where he sat in his truck, he could see the soft glow of string lights inside, the balloons dancing in the breeze. A birthday party was happening in there, his daughter's 7th birthday. He had been counting down the days, dreaming of her laughter, the candles, the cake he had baked himself at dawn. But he was not inside. No, he was out here in the cold, clutching a pink gift bag with trembling hands. His reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a ghost, wet hair plastered to his forehead, jaw set, eyes wide with disbelief. "You are not welcome here, man," Tyler had said, smirking like he owned the place. Rick could still feel the shove of Tyler's hand on his chest, the sting of those words. Inside, he could see Emma's face pressed to the window. Her small hand waved to him, confusion and hurt shining in her eyes. Rick's heart thumped so hard it hurt. He opened the door, rain slashing across his face, and took a step closer to the house. He had to see her, just for a minute. But Tyler was already at the door, Kelly's hand on his arm, her lips moving too fast. "You need to leave," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "I am her father," Rick said, his voice cracking. "I am not leaving." Tyler's smirk widened. "You heard her. Leave now, or I will make you." Rick felt the weight of every promise he had ever made to his daughter pressing down on his shoulders. His fingers clenched around the gift bag, knuckles white. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice breaking as he searched Kelly's eyes. But she looked away, refusing to meet his gaze. The wind howled, rattling the windows as he turned and walked back to his truck, each step feeling like a betrayal. He sat behind the wheel, the rain hammering the roof, and let out a shuddering breath. He had been shut out of his daughter's life, on her birthday, no less. Rick's phone buzzed, and he saw Mitch's name flashing on the screen, his brother in arms. He answered with a hoarse voice. "They kicked me out, man," he said, the words tasting like blood in his mouth. "Out of my own daughter's birthday." Mitch's voice was steady. "Rick, listen to me. You are not alone. We will make damn sure they regret this." Rick swallowed hard, the words like an anchor in his stormy heart. Outside, the house was glowing warm and golden, but he was done standing in the cold. The question hanging in the air, how far would they go to take back what was his? Earlier that day, the house had been alive with laughter. Rick had arrived with the cake box balanced in his hands, a smile stretched across his face. Emma's eyes had lit up when she saw him. She ran straight to him, tiny arms wrapping around his waist. "Daddy, you made it," she squealed. "Of course I did. Pumpkin," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I would not miss it for the world." He had spent all morning making her favorite cake, vanilla with pink frosting and rainbow sprinkles. It sat on the kitchen counter, a bright spot of love he had poured into every swirl. But as he stepped inside, something felt wrong. Kelly's smile was tight, her eyes darting to Tyler, who was already there, already too comfortable. "Hey, Rick," Tyler said, clapping him on the back like they were old friends. Rick stiffened at the touch, his smile slipping. "Tyler," he said, forcing politeness. "Glad you could make it." Emma tugged his hand. "Come see the balloons, Daddy." Rick let her pull him into the living room, the walls decorated with bright colors and paper flowers. He tried to ignore the way Kelly and Tyler whispered in the corner, their heads bent together like conspirators. He knelt beside Emma, his heart lifting as she laughed, her eyes full of light. "Did Mommy help you pick these out?" he asked, ruffling her hair. She said Tyler did. Emma said, and Rick's stomach tightened. The party carried on, cake slices handed out, candles blown, music playing low. But every time Rick looked at Kelly, she looked away. Every time Tyler touched her arm, it felt like another crack in Rick's chest. He felt the betrayal building in the small things, The way Kelly laughed at Tyler's jokes, the way she let him pour drinks, the way her mother shot Rick pitying looks. As the party wound down, Kelly's mother leaned close, her voice low. "Rick, it might be best if you left early." His throat went dry. "This is my daughter's birthday," he said. "I am her father." "I know," she said. "I sad. But Kelly, she thinks it would be better." "Better for who?" He wanted to shout. He stepped outside, the air cold and sharp, and watched through the window as Tyler handed Emma a slice of cake. It was his cake. Rick's fingers twitched at his sides. He had promised Emma he would always be there. Today, they had broken that promise for him. Rick took a breath, the wind cutting through his jacket, and walked back to his truck. He would not let this stand. Rick sat in his truck, the engine idling low, staring out at the house that had once been his home. Memories crowded his mind. Emma's first steps on that porch, her laughter echoing down the hallways. Now, it was all shadows and secrets. He watched as Tyler opened the door, Kelly laughing softly at something he whispered. Rick's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He fumbled with his phone and called Mitch again. "Mitch, I need your help. I cannot just let them shut me out. This is not just about Emma's party. Something is going on here." Mitch's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Tell me everything you saw. Every look, every word." Rick did. He described the way Kelly leaned into Tyler, the way Tyler watched him with that smug smile. "He is not just some rebound. There is something else here, something bigger. Then we will find it," Mitch said. "We will not let them win." Rick looked back at the house one last time. Emma was standing by the window again, tiny hands pressed against the glass. He raised his fingers in a small wave, and her eyes lit up. Just for a moment, he saw the daughter he loved looking at him like he was still her hero. "I will not let them take her from me," he said, voice low. "Good," Mitch said, "because I have already called Jonah. We are going to dig. And when we find out what they are hiding, they will wish they had never tried to break you." Rick closed his eyes, feeling the weight of that promise settle in his chest like a heartbeat. He took a deep breath, opened his eyes, and stared at the house that was no longer his. They had kicked him out, but he was not done yet. Wait, if this story gave you chills or made you think twice about trust, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button to support the channel, and subscribe if you never want to miss another jaw-dropping tale. We drop new stories every week that'll leave you speechless. To everyone who's already subscribed, sending you heartfelt love and thanks. Join the family, because here, every story hits different. Now, let's dive back into the story. Rick watched from the edge of the living room as Tyler played the perfect host. He poured drinks and cracked jokes, his arm always too close to Kelly's. The laughter that used to belong to Rick felt stolen now, echoing around the room like a taunt. Rick moved through the crowd of guests, neighbors and friends he used to know, feeling like a stranger in his own home. He caught snippets of polite conversation, forced smiles, and glances that quickly turned away. The music was soft, some old pop song that should have felt happy. But all Rick heard was the pounding of his own heart. He watched Emma dancing in her princess dress, her laughter bright and pure. She twirled for her mother, then turned to see if her father was watching. Rick smiled at her, his throat tight. She was the only thing that mattered. But Kelly's cold gaze kept pulling him back. He saw the way her shoulders stiffened whenever he spoke, how her laughter rang hollow when he tried to join in. Tyler never left her side, like a shadow she had chosen over the light of her own family. Rick stepped into the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. The cake he had made sat on the counter, untouched. He ran a finger along the frosting, then wiped it away. Kelly appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "You are making people uncomfortable, Rick." He turned to her, his voice calm but shaking. "I am Emma's father. I have every right to be here." "Not today," she said. "Today is not about you." He looked at her, searching for the woman he had married. But all he saw was someone he barely recognized. "It was never about me, was it?" he said quietly. She said nothing, just turned and walked back to the party, leaving him alone with the flickering candles and the taste of betrayal in the air. Rick stepped outside, the air sharp with the smell of rain. The wind tugged at the party decorations, streamers flapping like ragged flags. He could hear the faint music from inside, but it felt miles away. He stood on the porch, phone in his hand, dialing Mitch. The line buzzed, then clicked. "Mitch," Rick said, his voice low. "I think something more is going on here." "Tell me," Mitch said. Rick took a breath, glancing back through the window. Tyler had his hand on Kelly's back, his fingers lingering a moment too long. Rick's jaw tightened. "It is not just an affair," Rick said. "Tyler is in everything. He is handling money, talking to everyone like he owns the place. She is not herself." Mitch was silent for a moment, then said, "We will find out what he is really after." Rick's hands shook as he ended the call. The rain started to fall harder, cold and relentless. He took one last look through the window at his daughter's face, her bright smile, so innocent. He felt the weight of everything he had built crashing down around him. The door creaked open behind him. He turned to see Kelly's mother, her face pale. "Rick," she said softly, "you should go." "I am her father," he said again, his voice rough. She shook her head, tears brimming. "I know, but she does not want you here right now." Rick swallowed hard. He nodded, turning back to the driveway. He climbed into his truck, the rain soaking through his jacket. As he pulled away, he whispered to himself, "This is not over. Not by a long shot." The storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing in his chest. The rain had stopped by the time Rick got home. He sat in the dark truck, the dashboard light glowing faintly. His mind was a mess of memories and questions. He thought of Emma's face, pressed against the window. The way Kelly's eyes had darted away from his. The way Tyler had moved so easily through his life, like he had always belonged there. Rick's phone buzzed, a text from Mitch. "Meet me at the bar," it read. "We need to talk." Rick pulled himself together and drove through the wet streets, the wipers beating time with the thoughts racing in his head. When he stepped into the bar, he saw Mitch at a corner table, a whiskey glass in his hand. Mitch looked up, his eyes steady. "Rick," he said, "you are not crazy. I have seen it too. Tyler is not just some fling. He is working an angle. And Kelly, she is deeper in than you think." Rick sank into the seat across from him, his hands curling into fists. "I saw them," Rick said. "The way she looked at him, it is like I never existed." Mitch leaned forward. "I have a contact who can dig deeper. We will find out exactly what Tyler is hiding, and we will find out why Kelly is helping him." Rick nodded, feeling the first flicker of something that was not just pain, it was resolve. "Whatever they are up to," he said, his voice low, "I will not let them drag Emma into it. I will not let them win." Mitch raised his glass. "That is the Rick I know." As Rick took a slow breath, the bar's old jukebox played a mournful song. Outside, the clouds were breaking, a sliver of moonlight cutting through the night. Rick knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was done being shut out. They had kicked him out of his daughter's birthday, but he would make damn sure they regretted it. Rick sat at the bar long after Mitch had left. The ice in his glass melted to nothing. His mind was alive with questions, every memory of the party twisting deeper into his chest. He could not shake the image of Tyler's hand on Kelly's back, the way she had smiled at him like he was her world. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath, trying to steady the storm inside. The words from Kelly's mother, "She does not want you here," echoed in his head like a taunt. When he finally stood up, he felt like his legs were made of lead. The world outside was damp and dark, the night air cold against his face. He drove back to his apartment, every mile feeling longer than the last. He pushed open the door and dropped his keys on the table. The silence was a knife, no laughter, no warmth. He ran a hand through his hair, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through pictures of Emma, her bright smile and messy hair, her laughter frozen in each image. A memory hit him, her tiny voice whispering, "Promise you will always be there, Daddy." He would keep that promise. The next morning, he showed up at Kelly's house early, determined to see Emma. He knocked once, twice, then stepped back. The door opened, and there she was, his daughter, hair tangled from sleep, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Daddy," she cried, launching herself into his arms. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the feel of her small hands clutching his shirt. "I missed you, Pumpkin," he whispered. Behind her, Kelly stood with crossed arms, her face unreadable. "Rick, this is not the time." Rick looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Every time is the time. I am her father, Kelly." She looked away, her lips pressing together. But Rick saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes before she turned and walked back inside. He kissed Emma's forehead, feeling a steel resolve harden in his chest. This was the final straw. He would not let them shut him out again. Rick's truck rumbled to life as he pulled away from the house, his daughter's laughter still echoing in his ears. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles ached, the taste of anger bitter on his tongue. He had spent years building a life with Kelly, years of birthdays and holidays, of small joys and quiet nights. Now it felt like a stranger's home, and he was the ghost on the doorstep. He drove aimlessly at first, the early morning light painting the world in pale gold. His mind replayed every word, every look Kelly had given him, every betrayal that had led to this. When his phone buzzed, he snatched it up like a lifeline. Mitch's voice was steady on the other end. "Rick, come by the shop. We need to talk." Rick pulled into the auto shop where Mitch worked part-time. The smell of oil and old leather wrapped around him as he stepped inside. Mitch was at the workbench, wiping grease from his hands. "You look like hell," Mitch said, handing him a coffee. Rick took it, grateful for the warmth. "I feel like it too." Mitch leaned against the bench, his eyes narrowing. "I did some digging. Tyler is not just some smooth-talking boyfriend. He has got a record, petty fraud, false business filings. And Kelly, she is tied to some of his shady deals." Rick stared at him, the words like ice in his veins. "She is helping him?" Mitch nodded slowly. "She signed off on some paperwork for him, documents about veterans' funds." "It looks bad, Rick." Rick felt his stomach drop. Emma's trust fund, the veterans' money, everything he had once believed safe was suddenly at risk. "I will not let him use her. Or my daughter," Rick said, his voice low and certain. Mitch clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Then we will find out everything. And we will bring it all down." As Rick stepped back outside, the sun was rising, streaking the sky in red and gold. A new day, a new fight. He would not be exiled from his own life. Rick's mind was buzzing as he drove back to his apartment. Every word Mitch had said kept replaying. Tyler's fraud, Kelly's part in it, the veterans' funds. He had always known something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through his bones. He pulled into his driveway and sat there for a long moment, watching the sky turn from gold to pale blue. He thought of Emma, her laughter, her tiny hand in his. That was what he was fighting for. He took out his phone and dialed Jonah, his oldest friend from the SEALs. Jonah picked up on the second ring. "Rick," Jonah said, his voice warm and solid. "I heard what happened." "I need you," Rick said. "I need your eyes on this. Tyler is up to something big, and Kelly is tangled in it. I will not let them take Emma or anyone else down with them." Jonah's voice went hard. "I am in. Tell me everything." Rick told him what Mitch had found, about Tyler's past, the veterans' fund, Kelly's signatures. As he spoke, he felt a surge of something fierce in his chest. Jonah was quiet for a moment. "We will get the proof. And when we do, they will wish they had never tried to break you." Rick took a breath, the weight of years of friendship and loyalty filling the air between them. "Thank you, brother." "Always," Jonah said. "This is what we do." Rick ended the call, feeling stronger than he had in days. He looked up at the sky. Clear now, the clouds burned away by the sun. He whispered to himself, "I am coming for them. For Emma. For the truth." Then he stood up, the old strength in his bones like a war drum. He had been kicked out of his daughter's birthday, but he would not be kicked out of her life. He would not stop until every secret was brought into the light. The air in the bar was thick with the smell of old wood and spilled whiskey. Rick sat across from Mitch and Jonah, his hands wrapped around a glass he had not touched. The flickering neon sign outside cast shifting shadows on their faces. Mitch leaned forward, his voice low. "Rick, we are with you. You are not alone in this. You never were." Jonah nodded, his eyes steady. Tyler thinks he is clever, using Kelly to hide his schemes. But he has no idea who he is dealing with. Rick's jaw tightened. He is using her. He is using my daughter's future. I will not let him get away with that. Jonah's hand rested on the table, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm. We need to be smart. Tyler is connected. He has money, and he has people. But we have something he does not: honor. Mitch added, "And brotherhood. That matters more than anything." Rick took a slow breath, feeling the weight of their words settle into his bones. For the first time in weeks, he felt the old sense of purpose stirring in his chest. "I am done playing the part of the good father standing outside," he said. "I am done watching them tear my life apart." Mitch cracked a small smile. "Good. Because we have already started pulling threads. Tyler's records, Kelly's phone logs, even the veterans' fund transfers. There are holes in his story, Rick. Big ones." Rick looked at them, feeling the bond of their shared past. Years of war, of missions no one else knew about. "He thinks he can hide in the shadows," he said. "But he does not know what happens when you push a man like me too far." Jonah raised his glass, his eyes locked on Rick. "To family," he said quietly. Rick raised his own glass, the words resonating deep. "To family," he echoed. In that moment, he felt the first real flicker of hope since the day he had been forced from his daughter's birthday. The night outside was cold, but inside the bar, it was warm with the low murmur of voices and the clink of glasses. Rick leaned back in his seat, listening as Mitch and Jonah traded stories, memories of dusty roads, of nights spent in hostile cities, of missions that had left scars deeper than any bullet wound. Rick sipped his whiskey, the burn sliding down his throat, anchoring him in the present. The memories of the battlefield felt like another life, but tonight they were closer than ever. Jonah's voice was rough with old smoke. "You remember that night in Kandahar? When they tried to ambush us in that alley?" Mitch nodded. "Yeah, they thought they had us boxed in. But we found a way out, because that is what we do. We find a way out." Rick looked between them, feeling the weight of those words. "And we will find a way out of this too," he said, his voice steady. Mitch's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. Tyler is a parasite, but he does not understand the power of men who have nothing left to lose but their honor. Rick nodded slowly. "He wants to steal my daughter's future, to erase everything I have fought for. I will not let him." Jonah leaned forward. "We will not let him," he said. "We will gather everything, every slip, every piece of evidence. And when it is time, we will bring it down on his head like a hammer." Rick felt his heart thumping, a steady beat that matched the weight of their words. He thought of Emma, of the way she had looked at him through the window. That was what mattered. He took a slow breath, the smoky air filling his lungs. "This is not just about me," he said quietly. "It is about every man he has tried to use. Every brother he has tried to steal from." Mitch clapped his hand on Rick's shoulder. "And that," he said, "is why he will never win." The next morning, Rick woke before dawn, the memory of his brother's words like steel in his veins. He dressed quietly, slipping out of his apartment and into the cold morning air. The world was still and silent, a blank canvas waiting to be painted with purpose. He met Mitch at an old diner just off the highway, the place empty but for a few truckers nursing coffees. The smell of burnt toast and bitter coffee filled the air. Mitch slid a file across the table. "Tyler's shell companies. Fraudulent paperwork. I got it all from a friend at the courthouse." Rick flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing as he took in the details. Phony contracts, forged signatures, money funneled through fake charities. His stomach twisted. "He is not just a liar," Rick said. "He is a criminal." Mitch nodded. "And Kelly's name is on some of those forms. She may not know how deep it goes, but she is in it." Rick closed the file, his jaw set. "She chose him, but I am going to make sure she sees who he really is." Jonah arrived, sliding into the booth with a quiet nod. I have been talking to some of the guys at the city offices. Tyler has been paying off officials to keep his scams quiet, but there are cracks in his armor. Rick looked at both of them, his voice calm and certain. We start with this. We gather everything, every deal, every payment, and then we expose him for what he is. Mitch's eyes glinted with purpose. And when we do, it will not just be him that falls. Rick took a breath, feeling the weight of it settle in his chest. He thought of Emma, of the future she deserved. He would not let Tyler steal that future. This was the beginning, and Rick was ready to fight. The morning light streamed through the diner windows, catching the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Rick's fingers drummed on the stack of files spread out before him, each page a puzzle piece in the portrait of Tyler's lies. He scanned line after line. Phony contractors, bank statements that twisted like a snake, signatures that should never have been there. His gut churned. Mitch leaned in close. These documents, they prove Tyler is not just a smooth talker. He is a predator. And Kelly, she is signing off on things she does not even understand. Rick's mouth was a thin line. Or maybe she does understand. Maybe she knows exactly what she is doing. Jonah grunted. Either way, she is in it up to her neck. But it is Tyler pulling the strings. Rick's eyes narrowed on one document in particular, a contract for a veterans housing project, Kelly's signature right beside Tyler's. His hands clenched. They are using the money meant for our brothers' families. Mitch's jaw tightened. It is blood money, and we are going to end it. Rick took a breath, feeling the fury settle into something colder, something that would not waver. He had been a SEAL once. He knew what it was to take on an impossible mission. He looked up at his friends. We need more. We need to know who else is involved. Who is helping Tyler cover his tracks? Jonah's eyes were hard. I have a friend at City Hall. He owes me. I will find out who signed off on these permits. Rick nodded. And I will talk to Kelly's mother. She knows more than she is saying. I saw it in her eyes. Mitch pushed his coffee away. Then let's move. We have work to do. As they stood, Rick felt a calm fury settle into his bones. He would not let Tyler or Kelly steal one more thing from him, least of all the honor of his brothers who had given everything. The next evening, Rick stood on Kelly's porch, the same steps he had walked 1,000 times in better days. The air smelled of pine and cold earth, the wind rattling the porch swing against the railing. He knocked once, twice, no answer. On the third knock, the door swung open. Kelly's mother stood there, her eyes wide with surprise. Rick, what are you doing here? She asked softly. I need to talk to Kelly, he said, his voice calm. It is important. She hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder. She is not here. She went out with Tyler. Rick's jaw tightened. Of course she did. He stepped back, but then he caught the flicker of something in her eyes, fear. You know what he is doing, do you not? He asked quietly. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked down, her hands twisting in her sweater. Please, Rick said, his voice dropping low. If you know something, if you care about Emma at all, tell me. She met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with tears. I think she is in over her head. Tyler, he is not who she thinks he is. But she will not listen to me. She will not listen to anyone. Rick nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle like a stone in his chest. Thank you, he said. He turned and walked back down the steps, the wind cold against his face. As he reached the bottom, he stopped and looked back at the house. Once his home, now a stranger's place. He whispered to himself, I will not let them destroy her. Or Emma. He knew Kelly was lying to herself, maybe even to him. But the truth was out there, and he would drag it into the light if he had to. Rick met Mitch and Jonah later that night in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, the cold concrete floor echoing their footsteps. Jonah had a laptop open on an old crate, files glowing in the dim light of a single hanging bulb. I talked to my guy at City Hall, he said, his voice low. There are payoffs. Quiet ones, cash under the table, favors in the dark. Tyler's got them all in his pocket. Mitch's face was a mask of focus. And Kelly, Jonah looked up. She signed off on the veterans' fund paperwork. Maybe she thought it was just business, or maybe she knew. But either way, she is in it. Rick felt his jaw clench. He used her trust, and she let him. Mitch's voice was grim. We need more. Bank accounts, hidden funds, anything that ties this back to Tyler and clears you. Rick stepped closer, his breath clouding in the cold air. Then we go deeper. We find every crack in his story, every lie he has told. And when we have it all, we bury him with it. Jonah's fingers flew over the keys, files opening, documents coming to life on the screen. I will find it, brother. I promise you that. Rick watched the glow of the laptop, feeling the old fire in his chest. He had faced worse than Tyler. He had faced men who thought they could take everything from him. But he had never let them. And he would not start now. As they worked late into the night, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together, bit by bit, lie by lie. And with each piece, Rick felt his resolve grow stronger. They had taken his place at his daughter's birthday, but they would never take away his name, his honor, or his right to fight for what mattered most. The night was deep and cold as Rick drove through the empty streets, his mind a storm of memories and plans. The glow of the streetlights blurred against the windshield, but he did not slow down. He could not. He parked outside a rundown bar on the edge of town, the neon sign flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, Duke was already waiting, a half-empty beer bottle sweating in his hand. Rick sat down across from him, the wood of the table scarred and worn. You said you had something, he said, his voice low. Duke nodded slowly, his eyes dark. I did some digging of my own, he said. And brother, it goes deeper than just Tyler. Rick leaned in, every nerve in his body alive. What did you find? Duke took a breath. Kelly's been seeing him for longer than you think. This was not some sudden thing. This was planned. Tyler found her, charmed her, pulled her in. And she let him. Rick's chest tightened. He had known, deep down, he had known it was not just a fling. But hearing it, spoken so plainly, was like a knife. She helped him get into those contracts, Duke went on. She vouched for him. That is why no one questioned it when he showed up with his fancy stories. Rick's hands curled into fists. She let him steal from the people I swore to protect. From our brothers who never came home. Duke nodded. She did. But I do not think she understands how deep he has her, or how far he will go. Rick stared at the bottle in front of him, the condensation cold under his fingertips. Then we have to show her, he said finally. We have to make her see. Duke leaned back, his eyes narrowing. What are you going to do? Rick looked up, his gaze steady. I am going to drag every lie into the light, and I am going to make them regret ever thinking they could take what is mine. The next morning, Rick stood at the edge of a small park, the sun just beginning to warm the frost-covered grass. The memorial stood silent in the early light, a wall of names etched in stone, each letter a memory, a sacrifice. Rick ran his fingers over the names, his breath misting in the cold air. He had known some of them, brothers who had never come back. He thought of the promises they had made to each other. Never leave a brother behind. Never let a liar profit from their blood. He felt the weight of his own promise pressing into his bones. Emma deserved to know the truth, to grow up free from the lies that had been woven around her. Mitch joined him, his hands in the pockets of his jacket. You good? He asked quietly. Rick nodded. I will be. Mitch looked at the names, his brow furrowed. This is what he is stealing from. These men gave everything. And Tyler is lining his pockets with their memory. Rick's jaw tightened. Not for long. Mitch turned to him, his voice steady. We are close, Rick. We have almost everything we need. One more piece, and we can blow it all open. Rick took a deep breath, his mind already working. Then we find that piece. And we end this. They stood there a moment longer, the silence between them filled with the weight of what they were about to do. As they turned to leave, Rick looked back at the wall one last time. He whispered to the names he had once called brothers, I will not let him take this from you. Or from me. And with that promise in his heart, he walked away from the memorial, ready to bring the fight to the men who had tried to bury the truth. Rick knew where to find Kelly that night. The fancy new restaurant on the edge of town, Tyler's new favorite place to flaunt his money. Rick walked through the door, his boots heavy on the polished floors. The hostess looked up, surprised, but he did not slow down. He saw them at a corner table, Tyler's hand resting on Kelly's arm, her laughter forced and hollow. As he approached, Kelly's smile faltered. Tyler turned, his smirk already in place. "Rick," he said smoothly, "what brings you here tonight?" Rick's eyes were cold as he looked at Kelly. "We need to talk." Kelly shifted in her seat. "This is not the time, Rick." Rick leaned forward, his voice low but clear. "There is never a time to talk about how you let him steal from the men I fought beside." Tyler's smile widened. "Careful, friend. You are making a scene." Rick's hands were steady on the table. "You have no idea what a scene looks like, Tyler. But you will." Kelly swallowed hard, her fingers twisting in her lap. "Rick, please, no," Rick said, his voice sharper now. "I will not stay silent while you play house with this parasite." Tyler's face hardened. "Watch yourself, Rick." Rick's eyes never left Kelly's. "I have watched enough. I have watched you lie to me. I have watched you sign away the future of my brothers. I have watched you pretend this is not your problem." The restaurant fell quiet around them, eyes turning their way. Kelly looked down, her shoulders tight. Rick straightened, his voice calm but final. "This is not over. Not even close." He turned and walked out, leaving Tyler's smirk and Kelly's shaking shoulders behind. Outside, the night was cold and clear, and Rick felt the weight of every step he took. The confrontation had not ended it, but it had started something, and Rick was ready for whatever came next. Rick drove through the quiet streets, the night pressing in around him. The lights of the city glowed like embers, but he saw nothing except the path ahead, dark and full of questions. He parked in an alley near Tyler's office building, the red brick walls looming tall. He stepped out into the cold, his breath misting in the air. Mitch was already there, leaning against the hood of his truck. "You sure about this?" Mitch asked, his voice low. Rick nodded. "I need to see it for myself. I need to know exactly how deep this goes." They moved in silence, slipping through the shadows toward the back door. Jonah was waiting, his face set. "Security's light tonight," he said. "Tyler thinks he is untouchable." Rick slipped inside, the scent of old carpet and stale coffee hitting him. The office was dark, but the glow of computer screens lit the room in cold blue light. Mitch cracked the door open, his eyes sharp. "We have 5 minutes, maybe less. Grab everything you can." Rick moved quickly, rifling through drawers, scanning file after file. He found names, veterans he knew, men who had trusted Tyler with their future. He found bank statements, checks written to shell companies. And then he found something that made his blood run cold. A letter of guarantee, Kelly's name scrawled at the bottom. He held it up, the paper shaking in his hand. "She really did it," he said, his voice hollow. Jonah clapped his shoulder. "We are going to make this right, Rick. But we have to move, now." They slipped back into the night, the cold wind slapping their faces. Rick felt the weight of what he carried, a truth that would destroy everything. But it had to be done. He would not let them hide in the shadows any longer. Back at Mitch's apartment, the three men spread the files across the kitchen table. The small space was lit by a single hanging bulb, the air thick with tension. Rick traced the lines on the paper with his finger, money flowing like water, each line a betrayal. Mitch poured coffee, his voice steady. He has been siphoning money from veterans programs for years. Kelly's name is on half of it, but she is just a pawn in his game. Rick's jaw tightened. She signed those papers. She helped him. Jonah leaned in. Maybe she did not know. Or maybe she thought she was helping you. Helping Emma. Tyler is good at twisting things. Rick stared at the paperwork, the weight of it pressing down on his chest. It does not matter. She lied. She chose him over me. Over Emma. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Finally, Mitch spoke. "We need to make this public. Show everyone who Tyler really is, what he has really done." Rick nodded, his voice cold. "And I will make Kelly see it too." She does not get to pretend anymore. Jonah's lips curved in a small, grim smile. You are going to rip the mask off him, brother, and we will be right beside you. Rick looked at them, his brothers in every way that counted. He felt the old strength returning, the unbreakable bond that had seen them through worse than this. They kicked me out of my daughter's birthday, he said quietly, his voice like steel. But they will never kick me out of her life, or take what is mine. Rick spent the next morning watching the sunrise from his apartment window, the golden light spilling over the city like a promise. He held a mug of coffee in his hands, the warmth steadying him. He thought of Emma's smile, the way her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. He thought of the promises he had made to her, that he would always be there, no matter what. He would not break that promise. He called Mitch. I am done waiting, he said. We take it all down. Every lie, every theft. I want everyone to know. Mitch's voice was calm, sure. We have the files. We have the witnesses. And we have the truth. Let's do it. Rick dressed with care, simple clothes, but every piece deliberate. He looked at himself in the mirror, seeing not the man who had been shoved out of his daughter's birthday, but the father who would never stop fighting. He met Mitch and Jonah outside the courthouse, the files in hand. The cold air bit at his skin, but he welcomed it. It made him feel alive, ready. Jonah looked at him, his voice steady. You ready? Rick nodded once. More than ready. They stepped inside together, the marble halls echoing their footsteps. Rick felt the weight of everything they were about to do pressing down on him, but he would not falter. He thought of Emma, her laughter, her dreams, and he knew he would not stop until she was safe. No matter how far this went, no matter who tried to stand in his way. The courthouse steps felt colder than the winter air. Rick stood tall, the files clutched tight in his hands, his breath steady clouds in the morning light. Mitch adjusted his jacket, his eyes scanning the growing crowd. You sure about this, Rick? Once it is out, there is no going back. Rick nodded, his jaw set. I was sure the moment they kicked me out of Emma's party. They wanted to erase me, but they are about to learn what it means to face a father who will not back down. Jonah cracked a small, cold smile. That is the Rick I know. The man who watched my back in 100 firefights. The man who never quit. Rick's eyes swept the courthouse doors, glass reflecting the gray sky, cold marble promising the weight of justice. This is not just for me, he said quietly. It is for every brother they try to cheat. For Emma's future. For the promise I made to her. Mitch gripped his shoulder, firm. We know, and we are with you. Inside, the courthouse was all echoing footsteps and whispers of paper. They walked side by side. 3 men who had faced war and come back to stand in the light. Rick handed the files to the clerk, the woman's eyes widening as she flipped through page after page. Bank statements, forged contracts, signatures that told a story of betrayal and theft. This will blow open an investigation, she said quietly. Rick met her gaze, his voice calm and certain. That is exactly what I want. As they walked back outside, the cold wind cut through Rick's jacket, but he felt the warmth of resolve deep in his bones. They had tried to bury the truth, but the seal code ran deeper than any lie. Never leave a brother behind. Never let evil thrive in the dark. And now, Tyler and Kelly were about to learn that code still lived in every breath Rick Lawson took. The next night, Rick found himself in the quiet hum of a late-night diner, the neon sign buzzing softly above the window. He stirred his coffee, the bitter scent grounding him as he watched the door. Kelly walked in, her face pale, eyes flicking nervously around the room. She slid into the booth across from him, her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Why did you call me here, Rick? She asked, her voice low. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. You know why? I saw the paperwork, Kelly. Your name on every deal. Did you even understand what you were signing? She flinched. I thought it was just business. Tyler said it was all above board. Rick's voice was quiet, but every word hit like a hammer. You let him use the money meant for veterans' families, for Emma's future, and you stood by him while he did it. Kelly's hands shook. I did not know. I swear. I did not know how deep it went. Did not know or did not care? Rick asked, his tone slicing through her excuses. Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them away with a trembling hand. I was scared. He made promises. He said we would be set, that Emma would have everything she ever needed. Rick's jaw tightened. You believed his lies, and you let him steal everything we built. She looked down, her shoulders slumping. I did not mean for it to get this far. It always goes farther than you think, Rick said softly. Until you are so deep you cannot see the way out. She met his gaze, her voice breaking. What are you going to do, Rick? I am going to protect my daughter, he said. And I am going to make sure Tyler can never touch another family again. She bowed her head, and in that silence, Rick saw the first flicker of understanding in her eyes. But it was too late. Rick left the diner with the weight of Kelly's tears still clinging to his skin. The air outside was crisp, the city lights cold and distant. He felt the truth settle in his chest like a stone. Kelly had chosen Tyler, and in doing so, she had chosen to stand against everything that mattered to Rick. He drove to Emma's school the next morning, parking across the street and watching as she skipped up the steps, her backpack bouncing with every step. Her innocence was a bomb, a reason to keep going. Inside, he signed in at the office, his name a silent promise on the page. I am here for Emma, he told the receptionist, his voice firm. She led him to the classroom, and for a moment, everything else fell away. Emma ran to him, her laughter warm and bright. Daddy, she squealed, her arms wrapping around his waist. He crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. How is my little pumpkin today? He asked, his smile real for the first time in days. I drew a picture of us, she said proudly, pulling a crumpled paper from her bag. It was stick figures, Emma in a bright dress, Rick standing tall beside her. No sign of Tyler. No sign of the lies that had torn their family apart. Rick took it, his throat tight. I love it, sweetheart. It is perfect. He held her close, breathing in the warmth of her small body. In that moment, he knew exactly why he was fighting. As he walked back to his truck, he felt the weight of betrayal pressing down. But he also felt the fierce love of a father who would never let go. Tyler had stolen money. Kelly had signed away trust. But Emma was his daughter, and that was something no one could ever take from him. The day was overcast, the sky heavy with clouds as Rick sat in his truck outside the lawyer's office. His phone buzzed with a message, results are in. Meet me. His heart pounded as he stepped inside, the sterile smell of the office wrapping around him like a vice. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, slid a sealed envelope across the desk. Rick took it, his fingers trembling. This will tell me if Emma is really mine, he asked, his voice rough. The lawyer nodded. It will. And no matter what is in there, she is your daughter in every way that matters. Rick swallowed hard, the words hitting deeper than he expected. He tore the envelope open, the paper crinkling in his hands. His eyes scanned the page, the words blurring as he read them again and again. The DNA test was clear. Emma was his daughter, by blood and by everything else that counted. Relief crashed over him, so strong his hands shook. He let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like forever. She is mine, he whispered, the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. The lawyer nodded again. No one can ever take that away from you. Rick stood, his legs unsteady but his heart steady and sure. Thank you, he said. Outside, the sky was still gray, but he saw a patch of blue breaking through the clouds. He pulled out his phone and called Mitch. She is mine, he said when Mitch answered. She is my daughter. And now I have the proof. Mitch's voice was warm with relief. Good. Because this changes everything. Now we show Tyler and everyone else that they can try to take everything, but they cannot touch what matters most. Rick hung up, the paper crumpled in his fist. Emma was his. That was the anchor he needed, the fuel for the fight that was not over yet. Rick drove straight to Mitch's garage, the DNA results burning a hole in his pocket. Mitch was already there, wiping grease from his hands as Rick stormed in. She is mine, Rick said, his voice low and certain. No matter what they try to say, she is mine. Mitch's eyes lit with the fire of victory. That is the best news I have heard in weeks. Jonah joined them a moment later, his face breaking into a rare grin. Tyler cannot play the doubt game anymore. He cannot use Emma as a wedge to break you down. Rick nodded, his shoulders straight. This is not just about me anymore. It is about her future. I will not let them poison it. They spread the files out on the workbench, the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together. Tyler's fake businesses, Kelly's blind signatures, the veteran's money that had been siphoned away, and now, the proof that Emma was Rick's, undeniable, unbreakable. Jonah tapped the papers with a finger. This is more than a scandal. This is a criminal enterprise. And when it comes out, Tyler and everyone tied to him will burn. Rick's jaw tightened. They thought they could play games with my life. With my daughter's life. They are about to find out what it means when a father fights back. Mitch's voice was calm and sure. We are going to lay it all out. No half-truths, no shadows. The veterans, the officials on Tyler's payroll, Kelly's part in this. Every single lie is going to come crashing down. Rick took a breath, feeling the weight of years of pain and betrayal harden into something sharper, something stronger. Then let us get to work, he said. They bent over the papers together, the night stretching out around them. Outside, the wind howled against the garage door, but inside, the air was alive with purpose. The results had changed everything, and now there was no turning back. That night, Rick found himself at the small memorial outside the VFW hall, a circle of flags and a simple stone marker that read, "For those who served." He ran his fingers over the cold granite, the names etched deep and proud. Some of them he had known, brothers who had never made it home. He closed his eyes, the memories rushing in, nights under foreign stars, the crackle of radio static in his ear, the steady presence of men he trusted with his life. He felt their strength even now. The SEAL code was more than a creed. It was a bond that lived in every breath he took. Mitch joined him, the two men standing shoulder to shoulder in the silent night. They would be proud of you, brother, he said quietly. Rick nodded, his voice a low growl. They gave everything for the people they loved. And I will not let a liar like Tyler take that away. Not for me, not for any of them. Jonah stepped forward, his breath clouding in the cold. This is our fight now. For Emma. For every family Tyler has tried to steal from. Rick took a slow breath, feeling the weight of their words settle into his bones. Then let us finish it. They turned and walked back to the trucks, the gravel crunching under their boots. Rick felt the ghosts of the past at his back, not a burden, but a strength. Each name a promise that he would not stop until justice was done. He looked up at the flags snapping in the wind, and his jaw tightened. I am not done, he said quietly. And with every step he took, he knew the fight was not just his. It was for every brother who had given their life for something bigger, and for every child who deserved the truth. The night air was cool and biting as Rick walked into the Veterans Gala. The old ballroom was dressed in gold and white, the chandeliers casting warm light across the room. But Rick's heart was cold steel. He walked in with Mitch and Jonah close behind, the weight of every lie and every stolen dollar pressing into his chest. But tonight was not about the past. It was about what came next. The crowd buzzed with polite conversation, unaware that the truth was about to shatter their comfortable evening. Rick spotted Tyler near the bar, his arm around Kelly's waist, both of them laughing like nothing had ever happened. Rick's lips tightened. Tonight, that laughter would end. He took a slow breath and stepped forward, slipping through the crowd until he stood just a few feet away. Tyler's smile faltered when he saw him, the smugness flickering in his eyes. Rick, Tyler said smoothly, did not expect to see you here. Rick's voice was calm, every word like a blade. I would not miss it for the world. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, holding it up for Tyler to see. This has every detail of what you have done, every lie, every stolen cent. Kelly's face went pale, her hand tightening on Tyler's arm. "Rick, what are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," he said. "Telling the truth." Tyler's smile slipped. "You are bluffing." Rick's eyes never wavered. "Play it, or I will." He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying. "Everyone here deserves to know who Tyler really is. How he stole from the very men he claimed to support. How he used my wife, my daughter. How he lied to every one of you." The room went silent, the music dying away as every eye turned to them. Tyler's face was a mask of fury, but Rick saw the fear behind it. Tonight, the mask was cracking. The crowd's whispers rose in a wave, the tension thick as Rick stepped back, his eyes locked on Tyler. Jonah moved to the laptop near the stage, plugging in the flash drive. The screen flickered to life, the first image filling the air, a bank statement, a forged signature, the money trail laid bare. Gasps echoed through the hall as each file appeared, the truth hammering home with every line of stolen funds and betrayal. Kelly's face was white, her hand trembling as she reached for Tyler. "You said it was nothing, you said." Tyler jerked his arm away, his jaw tight. "He is lying." Rick's voice was steady, calm. "No, Tyler. The lies end here." The veterans in the room shifted, their eyes narrowing as the truth sank in. Old friends of Rick, men he had served with, turned to each other, their expressions hard. Mitch stood beside Rick, his voice low. "You see their faces? They know what honor means. Tyler has no idea what he has unleashed." Rick nodded, his eyes never leaving Tyler's. He thought he could play the long game. But he forgot. He was playing against men who never fold. Tyler's face twisted in a snarl. "You think this changes anything?" "I have friends, Rick. I have people who will stand by me." Rick cut him off. "Then let them. Because I have something stronger. I have the truth. And I have brothers who do not run." The room was electric, the energy shifting as the final file played. A video clip of Tyler promising to bleed the veterans dry. His smirk burned into the screen for everyone to see. Silence fell, heavy and final. Tyler's shoulders slumped, the weight of his lies crashing down. Rick took a breath, his voice quiet but firm. "It is over." And in that stillness, he knew Tyler had lost. The next morning, Rick sat at the kitchen table in Mitch's apartment, the light of dawn creeping across the worn wood. The final battle was over, but the war was not done. Jonah leaned over the table, his finger tapping the names on the list they had compiled. Officials, crooked friends of Tyler, every one of them complicit in the theft. "We have them on the ropes," Jonah said. "They will try to wriggle free, but we have everything." Rick's eyes were steady. "We set the trap. Now we spring it." He picked up the phone, calling the reporter who had been following Tyler's fake charities for months. His voice was low and certain. "You want your story? I have it." The reporter's voice crackled with excitement. "You sure it is clean, Rick? No holes." "It is airtight," Rick said. "No more shadows. No more lies." Mitch poured coffee, his movements calm but sharp. "They will try to spin it. Tyler is slippery, but he is cornered now." Rick nodded. "Let them try. We are done waiting for justice. We are making it happen." He thought of Emma, of the bright light in her eyes when she said, "I drew a picture of us, Daddy." He thought of the promises he had made. To her, to his brothers, to himself. This was not just about revenge anymore. It was about honor. About showing Emma that her father stood for something true and unbreakable. Jonah closed the laptop with a soft click. "Ready to finish this?" Rick's eyes met his, calm and sure. "Ready." And in that moment, the air felt electric with possibility, like the storm had passed and the world was waiting for the first clear light of dawn. The sun was high in the sky when Rick parked outside City Hall, the thick envelope of evidence clutched in his hand. Every step he took up those marble steps felt like a battle won. One more victory over the darkness that had tried to swallow him whole. Inside, the air was cold and sharp with the scent of polished floors and fresh coffee. A receptionist looked up as he approached, eyes wide at the steel in his gaze. "I need to see the mayor," Rick said, his voice calm but firm. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked, her voice trembling. Rick laid the envelope on the counter, the weight of it solid and final. Tell him it is about the Veterans Fund, and Tyler's name is all over it. She nodded quickly, picking up the phone with a shaking hand. As she spoke in hushed tones, Rick stood there, breathing deep. He felt the old calm settle in, a soldier's calm, the stillness before the storm. A moment later, she gestured him through. Rick walked down the long hall, the click of his boots echoing off the marble walls. He stepped into the mayor's office, where the man sat behind a gleaming desk, surprise flickering in his eyes. Rick dropped the envelope in front of him. "Read it," he said simply. The mayor flipped through the pages, his face darkening with every line. This is enough to bury him," he said finally, his voice low. Rick nodded once. "Then do it. Or I will." The mayor looked up, his eyes steady. "We will. This city owes you and your brothers more than it can ever repay." Rick turned to leave, the door closing softly behind him. Outside, the world felt brighter, like the first breath of spring after a long, bitter winter. He had baited the snare, and he was ready to watch it snap shut. That night, Rick sat in his truck outside Emma's window, watching the soft glow of her night light through the curtains. The world felt strangely still, the silence a gentle hum around him. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. Emma's laughter, her tiny hands in his, the way she looked at him like he was her whole world. He would not let her lose that light. The door of the house opened, and Kelly stepped out, her face pale in the moonlight. She saw him and paused, her eyes full of shadows. "Rick," she said softly, stepping closer. "Why are you here?" He looked at her, his voice quiet but sure. "To make sure Emma sleeps safe. To make sure she wakes up to a world where the truth still matters." She wrapped her arms around herself, her shoulders tense. "I did not want this. I never wanted it to go this far." Rick's eyes softened, but he did not look away. "We do not always get to choose what we start, but we damn sure choose how it ends." She flinched, her lips parting, but no words came. In that silence, Rick saw the flicker of regret in her eyes, the weight of choices she could never take back. He turned back to the house, his hand resting on the truck door. "Take care of her tonight. Tomorrow, everything changes." As he drove away, the quiet night felt like a held breath, like the world was waiting for the final blow. The Veterans Gala was a glittering event, soft music, bright lights, laughter echoing through the grand hall. But beneath the sparkle was a pulse of tension, like a storm waiting to break. Rick walked in with Mitch and Jonah at his side, every step measured, every breath steady. The crowd parted around them, polite smiles freezing when they saw the cold resolve in their eyes. Tyler was there, of course, his suit perfect, his smile slick as he worked the room. Kelly hovered at his side, her eyes darting nervously. Rick's gaze found them instantly. He moved closer, every step deliberate, the weight of years of betrayal driving him forward. He stopped in front of Tyler, his voice calm. "Enjoying yourself?" Tyler's smile did not waver. "Just another night, Rick." Rick's lips twitched. "Not tonight. Tonight, the truth comes out." Jonah stepped up, slipping a USB drive into the hand of the event coordinator. The man's eyes went wide, but he nodded, moving to the stage. Rick turned back to Tyler, his voice low. "You took from men who gave everything. You lied to everyone who trusted you. And tonight, you face every lie you ever told." Tyler's smirk flickered. "You cannot prove anything." But his voice was drowned out as the screen flickered to life behind them. Images of bank accounts, stolen funds, signatures that betrayed every promise. The music died. The laughter turned to stunned silence. Kelly covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. And in that moment, Rick knew he had won. The room was hushed, every face turned toward the screen where Tyler's crimes played out like a confession. Rick stood in the center of it all, his shoulders straight, his gaze unwavering. Tyler's face twisted in fury, his voice rising. "You set me up." Rick's voice was quiet, calm. "No, Tyler. You set yourself up. I just made sure everyone saw it. Mitch and Jonah flanked him, their presence solid as iron. Kelly looked at Rick, her eyes red with tears. I did not know, Rick. I swear. Rick's eyes were sad but resolute. You chose to believe his lies. You chose to turn away. She shook her head, her voice breaking. I was scared, and I was fighting for us, Rick said. But you were never really there, were you? The silence stretched, the weight of every word hanging in the air. Finally, the event coordinator turned off the projector. The last image burned into everyone's mind. The crowd began to murmur, some angry, some just shocked. Tyler's shoulders slumped, his mask gone. He looked around like a cornered animal. Rick took a breath, his voice steady. I will not let you hurt another family, another brother, another child. He turned and walked away, each step sure and final. Outside, the night was cold and bright with stars. He looked up at the sky, his breath a soft cloud in the stillness. The war was not over. But tonight, the first real battle was won. The cold air outside was a welcome slap as Rick stepped away from the glowing lights of the gala. His breath hung in the night like smoke, his pulse steady and calm. He had done it. The mask was gone, and the truth was laid bare for the world to see. Mitch walked beside him, his hands deep in his pockets. You good? He asked quietly. Rick nodded once. Better than I have been in years. Jonah joined them, his eyes sharp in the moonlight. Tyler will try to run. Men like him always do. Rick's lips twisted into a hard smile. Let him. There is nowhere he can hide that the truth will not find him. They stopped at the edge of the parking lot, the faint sounds of the gala fading behind them. Rick looked back at the building, the warm glow of the chandeliers shining out into the night. He thought of Emma, of the way her hand felt in his. She was the only light that mattered. I did this for her, he said softly. For every brother whose name they tried to tarnish. Mitch clapped a hand on his shoulder. And you did it right, Rick. No more shadows. No more lies. Rick took a breath, the cold air filling his lungs. We finish it. We make sure they can never do this again. The three men stood together, the quiet strength of brotherhood wrapping around them like armor. Tonight was just the first cut. The final blow was still to come. Inside the gala, Tyler's fury was a storm barely contained. He tore the USB drive from the projector, his face red with anger. Kelly stood frozen beside him, her face pale. Tyler, what do we do now? She asked, her voice shaking. He glared at her, his voice low and dangerous. We do nothing. He thinks he has won, but he does not know how this game is played. She flinched at his tone, but he ignored her, turning back to the exit. Get your coat. We are leaving. Outside, Tyler's hands were fists at his sides. The air crackled around him, his mind racing. He had spent years building this empire of lies. He would not let it fall apart so easily. He grabbed Kelly's arm, his voice a snarl. You are coming with me. We are not done yet. Kelly's eyes were wide with fear. Tyler, please. I did not want this. He ignored her, pulling her toward the car. But inside, the cracks were spreading. She saw them in his eyes. The mask was gone, and what lay beneath was something she could no longer pretend to understand. As they drove away, Tyler's face was set in stone, his jaw tight. Rick thinks he has won, he muttered, his voice low and cold. But I will show him what it means to cross me. Kelly said nothing, her hands shaking in her lap. She looked out the window, the darkness of the night mirroring the fear in her heart. The next morning, Rick stood at the window of his apartment, watching the soft pink glow of dawn creeping over the city skyline. Emma's drawing still sat on the table, a simple picture of a family, bright and innocent. He traced the lines of the crayon with his finger, his chest tightening. She was why he had fought. She was why he would never stop. A knock on the door pulled him back. Mitch stepped in, his expression calm but alert. Tyler is on the move, he said. Word is he is trying to skip town. Rick nodded slowly. Let him run. He can run from me, but he cannot run from the truth. He turned back to the window, his voice quiet. I will not let Emma grow up wondering if her father fought hard enough. Mitch stepped forward, his voice steady. She will never wonder. She will know. Rick took a deep breath, the weight of it all settling into something steady inside him. I want her to see me not as the man they tried to push aside, but as the man who stood up. Mitch's eyes were warm with respect. Then let's finish this, Rick. For her. As they headed out, the early light caught Emma's drawing on the table, a promise in every bright color. Rick knew the fight was almost over, and he would not leave anything unfinished. The air in the small war room, Mitch's garage, was charged with a quiet, focused energy. Papers spread across the table, maps and photos and names underlined in red. Rick stood over them, his fingers drumming a slow beat on the battered wood. The silence was thick, but not empty. It was the silence of men who knew what they were about to do. Jonah leaned over the maps, his voice calm. Tyler is trying to move money offshore. If he succeeds, it will be gone. Untouchable. Rick's voice was quiet but firm. Then we do not let him succeed. Mitch glanced up from his notes. You know he will not go quietly. He is desperate now. Rick nodded. So are we. Desperate to see this through. Desperate to make sure Emma's future is not written by men like him. The air smelled of oil and cold steel, the weight of the past wrapping around them like the memories of old battles. Rick's mind flashed back to the SEAL missions, silent nights, the sound of his brothers breathing in the darkness, the shared knowledge that whatever waited on the other side of that door, they would face it together. He looked at Mitch and Jonah, his voice low. This ends tonight. Jonah cracked a small smile. Then let us make it count. As they rolled up the maps and gathered their gear, the door creaked open, dawn lights spilling across the floor. Rick stepped into it, his back straight, his heart steady. The storm was coming, and he was ready to meet it head on. Rick stood in the quiet before dawn, the cool air sharp against his skin. The city lay still, as if it was holding its breath for what was coming. He leaned against his truck, staring up at the sky as the first hints of sunlight cracked through the clouds. In that moment, the silence felt heavy with memory, every promise he had made to Emma, every battle he had fought to get here. Mitch stepped up beside him, a thermos of coffee in his hand. Could not sleep? He asked, his voice low and understanding. Rick shook his head. Too much to think about. Mitch offered the thermos. Then drink. Today is the day. Rick took a long sip, the heat of it grounding him. I keep thinking about Emma, he said, his voice steady. About how she will see all of this one day. I want her to know I fought for her, that I never gave up. Mitch's eyes were warm. She already knows. And one day, when she is old enough to understand it all, she will know her father stood tall. Rick let out a breath. I just want her to have a life better than mine. A life where she never has to wonder if someone will steal her future. Mitch clapped a hand on his shoulder. That is what we are doing today, brother. Taking back what is hers. The sun was a sliver on the horizon now, the first rays of light touching the city with gold. Rick felt something shift inside him. An anchor, a calm that came not from the absence of fear, but from the knowledge that he was exactly where he needed to be. Today it would all end. One way or another. Rick, Mitch, and Jonah sat in the garage as the morning light grew brighter, the weight of what they were about to do filling every breath. Jonah spread out the final plans, his voice low and steady. Tyler is meeting with his lawyer today, trying to secure those accounts before he runs. We hit him there. We hit him hard. Rick nodded, his jaw set. We let him see that the men he thought he could cheat will never stay down. Mitch checked his phone, his brow furrowing. He has security with him. They know he is cornered, and they will not let him go down easy. Rick looked at both of them, his voice calm. Then we be ready for whatever comes. No mistakes today. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He thought of Emma, her laughter, her drawings, the way her eyes lit up when he walked into the room. He thought of her future, bright and unbroken. Jonah's voice pulled him back. We will end this, Rick. You have already won. This is just the last step. Rick nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in his bones. He thought he could buy loyalty, but he does not understand. What we have cannot be bought. The three men stood, their movements smooth and sure. They had faced worse than Tyler, sand and steel, blood and fear. They walked out into the morning light together, each step a promise that no matter how high Tyler tried to build his walls, the truth would climb higher still. Rick took a breath, the city waking up around them. The gathering storm was here, and he was ready to walk straight through it. The lawyer's office was quiet, the air inside cool and sterile. Rick pushed open the door, the soft chime of the bell a hollow echo in the silence. Tyler sat across the desk from his lawyer, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously as Rick stepped inside. "You are not supposed to be here," Tyler snapped, his voice tight. Rick's voice was calm, every word measured. "I am exactly where I need to be." The lawyer stood, his hands up. "Gentlemen, this is a private meeting." Mitch stepped in behind Rick, his voice a quiet growl. "Not anymore." Rick laid the final stack of documents on the desk. Bank transfers, forged contracts, the paper trail that tied every stolen dollar back to Tyler. "This is the truth," Rick said, his voice low and steady. "Every lie you told, every life you tried to steal." Tyler's eyes flashed with anger. "You think this ends me? You think you can just walk in here and—" Jonah's voice cut in, cold and sharp. "It is over. Your friends cannot save you now." The lawyer looked at the papers, his face going pale. "Tyler, this is enough to bury you." Rick stepped closer, his eyes locked on Tyler's. "You played games with the lives of good men. You thought you could buy your way out. But you forgot. Some things cannot be bought." Tyler's shoulders slumped, the fight bleeding out of him. "This is not how it ends," he whispered. Rick's eyes were steady, his voice calm. "It ends exactly how it should." Tyler stood up, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the papers, his eyes wild. "I will find a way out," he spat, his voice low and desperate. Rick did not flinch. "There is no way out for you, Tyler. Not anymore." The lawyer moved to the door, his voice calm. "I am done here, gentlemen. I will make sure this reaches the right hands." As he left, silence fell in the office. Heavy, final. Tyler slumped into the chair, his shoulders hunched, the weight of every lie settling into his bones. He looked up at Rick, his voice almost a whisper. "You think you are a hero?" Rick's eyes never wavered. "No, I am just a father, a brother, and I will never let men like you write the end of my story." Tyler's laugh was hollow. "You think this will make things right? You think you can clean up the mess?" Rick took a slow breath. "I cannot erase what you did, but I can make sure you never do it again." Mitch stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "This is the last stand, Tyler. For you, for your lies, and for us." Tyler's face twisted in fury, but he said nothing more. As Rick walked out into the morning light, he felt the weight of it all lift from his shoulders. The fight was not over, but this battle was done. And for the first time in years, he felt the peace of a man who had stood his ground and refused to let evil win. The courthouse steps felt different now, no longer a place of dread, but a place of finality. Rick stood there in the early afternoon light, the weight of everything he had fought for pressing into his chest, but not like a burden, like an anchor. Emma stood beside him, her small hand wrapped in his, her eyes wide and curious as she looked up at the grand building. "Why are we here, Daddy?" she asked softly. Rick knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Because, Pumpkin," he said, his voice low but warm, "sometimes you have to stand in the light and tell the truth. No matter how hard it is. No matter who tries to stop you." She nodded solemnly, her small face serious. Mitch and Jonah stepped up behind them, their presence solid and unwavering. "We will be with you every step," Mitch said quietly. Rick nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know." They walked inside together, the echoes of their footsteps bouncing off the marble walls. Rick's lawyer met them at the door, his face calm and assured. "They have everything they need," he said softly. "Tyler will not see the outside of a cell for a long time." Rick took a breath. feeling the last pieces of the fight settle into place. As they walked back outside into the bright day, Emma slipped her hand back into his. "Are you happy now, Daddy?" she asked. He looked down at her, his heart swelling. "I am, Pumpkin, because now you will never have to wonder if the truth matters." That night, Rick sat on the porch of Mitch's place, the quiet hum of crickets filling the warm air. The weight of the years of lies and betrayal was gone, replaced by the steady comfort of brotherhood and love. Jonah handed him a beer, the cold bottle a solid weight in his hand. "You did it," Jonah said simply. Rick nodded, his voice quiet. "We did it. And Emma, she will never have to doubt what her father stood for." Mitch leaned back in his chair, a small smile on his lips. "Tyler will have years behind bars to think about what he did. But you get to go home to your daughter. You get to live in the light." Rick took a long sip, the taste of it grounding him in the moment. "That is all I ever wanted," he said. "For her to have a chance. For her to know her father never stopped fighting for what was right." The three men sat in comfortable silence, the peace of the night wrapping around them like a warm blanket. As the stars began to pierce the dark sky, Rick looked up, his voice low. "She is my future, my reason, and nothing will ever change that." Jonah nodded. "She will know it. She will feel it every day she looks at you." Rick smiled, a quiet peace in his chest. "That is enough." The next morning, Rick woke to the soft light of dawn streaming through his window. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Emma. She was still sleeping, her face peaceful and innocent. He walked outside, the air fresh and new, the world washed clean. Mitch and Jonah were already there, leaning against their trucks, the easy camaraderie of brothers who had seen the worst and come out stronger. Rick smiled as he stepped up beside them. "We did it," he said softly. Mitch nodded. "You did it for her. For all of us." Jonah's voice was quiet. "And for every man who ever thought he had no choice but to live in the dark." Rick looked out at the rising sun, feeling the promise of the new day settling deep in his chest. "Emma will never have to wonder who her father was," he said, his voice steady. "She will know. She will always know." The three men stood in the morning light, the last shadows of the past burned away by the strength of their resolve. And in that moment, Rick knew he had won. He turned back to the camera, his eyes bright. "Before we close this chapter, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. I would love to hear your story, too." A small smile touched his lips. "And if you felt even a spark of strength in this journey, like, subscribe, and join us for the next epic tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. Because this story is not the end. It is just the beginning." He paused, his voice turning quiet, almost reverent. "This story taught me something I will carry forever, that no matter how dark it gets, the truth will always find a way to shine through. And in the end, it is not about revenge. It is about making sure the light never dies." He raised his head, the dawn bright on his face. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never stop fighting for what matters. Fade to black. Deep, powerful lesson. No matter how many lies are told, no matter how many betrayals you face, truth and honor will always find a way to rise. Even in the darkest night, the smallest light can change everything. Stand tall. Hold on to what matters. Because in the end, that is what makes you unbreakable.